By the time you've reached the end of this text, you will have journeyed through more than a millennium of history. Every battle, every betrayal, every coronation that shaped what England and later Britain would become. We trace every ruler from the very first king of a united England all the way to Charles III. Athelstan stands as the earliest ruler to govern a truly unified England. In 927 AD, he managed to bring together all the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms under one crown. His defining moment came in 937 at the Battle of Brunanburh, one of the most savage engagements ever fought on British soil, where he overcame a combined force of Scots, Celts, Danes, and Vikings. This triumph cemented England as a single, cohesive realm for the first time in its history. King Edmund. Athelstan's half-brother Edmund took the throne at just 18 years of age and succeeded in reasserting Anglo-Saxon authority over the north of England. His life was cut tragically short when he was fatally stabbed by a bandit at a royal feast in Pucklechurch, dying at only 25. King Eadred. Edmund's younger brother Eadred came to power after him and drove out Eric Bloodaxe, the final Scandinavian ruler of York, in 954. Deeply devout and plagued by a chronic stomach ailment, Eadred never took a wife and passed away childless in his early 30s. King Edwig. Edmund's firstborn son Edwig ascended to the throne. Though his coronation got off to an unusual start, Bishop Dunstan reportedly had to drag him from bed, where he lay with his mistress and her mother. Edwig responded by banishing Dunstan to France. He died under unclear circumstances at just 20. King Edgar the Peaceful. Edwig's younger brother Edgar, who came to be called the Peaceful, ruled during a remarkably stable period. No Viking incursions troubled his reign. He overhauled England's coinage, introduced a standardized currency, and reorganized the land into the shires and counties still recognizable today. Although he stood only around 5 feet tall, he commanded a fleet of nearly 4,000 vessels. Edward the Martyr. Edgar's eldest son Edward became king at 13. He defended church institutions against attacks from powerful nobles, which earned him influential enemies. 3 years into his reign, at just 16, he was stabbed in the back while drinking from horseback at Corfe Castle, allegedly at his stepmother's direction. He became England's first officially recognized saint in 1001, and his feast day of the 18th of March still appears in the Church of England's Book of Common Prayer. Æthelred the Unready. Edward's half-brother Æthelred was only 10 when he inherited the crown. His nickname, the Unready, translates more accurately as badly counseled. His reign is remembered chiefly for his poor management of the Viking threat, most infamously the St. Brice's Day massacre of 1002, in which Danish settlers throughout England were slaughtered. This act provoked Svein Forkbeard of Denmark to invade, and by Christmas Day, 1013, Svein had been declared King of England, forcing Æthelred into exile in Normandy. Svein died just 5 weeks later, allowing Æthelred to return, but his final years were spent in relentless conflict with Svein's son Canute, without ever regaining true control. King Edmund Ironside. Æthelred's son Edmund earned the Ironside epithet for his bravery in resisting Canute's invasion. After his father's death, a dispute over succession erupted. London backed Edmund, while the Wheaton chose Canute. Following his defeat at the Battle of Asandun, Edmund was left with only Wessex, under an agreement that whoever died first would forfeit his share. Edmund died a few months later, probably murdered, having reigned for less than a year. Canute the Great. After Edmund's death, Canute united England with Denmark and Norway into a sweeping North Sea empire. Unexpectedly popular, he sent the bulk of his army home and wed Æthelred's widow, Emma of Normandy. The famous episode in which he commanded the tide to retreat was a calculated demonstration, his way of showing flattering courtiers that no king holds power over nature. His reign brought roughly 2 decades of peace and stability. King Harald Harefoot. Canute's illegitimate son Harald seized the throne while his half-brother Harthacnut, the rightful heir, was occupied defending Denmark. Known as Harefoot for his speed, Harald died in 1040, just weeks before Harthacnut arrived with his fleet. In retaliation, Harthacnut had Harald's corpse exhumed from Westminster Abbey, decapitated, and cast into the Thames. King Harthacnut. Canute's legitimate son Harthacnut was the final Danish king of England and proved deeply unpopular. He levied crushing taxes during a time of poor harvests. When 2 of his tax collectors were killed by the people of Worcester, he ordered the city burned in response. At a wedding feast in 1042, he collapsed mid-toast and died at only 24. King Edward the Confessor. Harthacnut's half-brother Edward restored Saxon rule after 26 years of Danish monarchs, having spent nearly 3 decades in exile in Normandy. His most enduring legacy is Westminster Abbey, constructed in Norman Romanesque style, the first such building in England. In 1161, he became the only English king to be canonized by the Pope. His death without an heir set off the succession crisis that brought about the Norman conquest. King Harald II. Edward's brother-in-law, Harald, possessed no royal blood, but was elected king by the Witan. His 9-month reign was defined by 2 major invasions. He marched his army 185 miles from London to Yorkshire in just 4 days to defeat the Norwegian king Harald Hardrada at Stamford Bridge, then turned south immediately when William of Normandy landed. Exhausted and outnumbered, Harald was killed at the Battle of Hastings in 1066, and Saxon England ended with him. King William the Conqueror. Following his victory at Hastings, William became the first Norman king of England. Born out of wedlock and originally known as William the Bastard, he fundamentally remade England. He displaced the Saxon ruling class with Normans, imposed the feudal system, and oversaw the construction of hundreds of castles. In 1086, he ordered the Domesday Book, a comprehensive survey of English landholdings still held at the National Archives today. Norman French reshaped the English language, giving us words such as beef, pork, and noble. William died in 1087, following a fall from his horse. King William II. The Conqueror's 3rd son, known as Rufus for his red hair, was broadly disliked. He plundered monasteries and left bishoprics vacant so he could collect their income. He never married and left no heirs. On the 2nd of August 1100, he was killed by an arrow while hunting in the New Forest under circumstances that remain disputed. The Rufus Stone in Hampshire marks the spot. King Henry I. The Conqueror's youngest son seized the crown 3 days after William II's death. Called the Lion of Justice for strengthening English law, his reign was defined by personal tragedy. In 1120, the White Ship capsized, killing roughly 300 people, including his only legitimate son, William. Henry reportedly never smiled again. He designated his daughter Matilda as his successor, But upon his death in 1135, his nephew Stephen took the throne first. King Stephen. Stephen reached England before Matilda and claimed the crown. Though a courageous fighter, he was an indecisive ruler whose reign unleashed 19 years of civil conflict known as the Anarchy. He was captured at the Battle of Lincoln in 1141, but later freed in exchange for Matilda's half-brother. The war concluded only when Stephen's own son died in 1153, leaving him no choice but to recognize Matilda's son Henry as heir. Stephen died the following year, ending Norman rule and opening the Plantagenet era. King Henry II. The first Plantagenet king, Henry ruled a vast realm through his marriage to Eleanor of Aquitaine. He laid the groundwork for England's jury system, but is most remembered for his feud with Thomas Becket, whom he had appointed Archbishop of Canterbury. When Becket defied him, 4 of Henry's knights murdered the archbishop, forcing Henry into public penance. His later years were consumed by rebellions led by his own sons. King Richard I, the Lionheart, Henry II's third son, earned his legendary nickname through sheer military courage. Although he wore the English crown for a decade, he spent only around 6 months in the country, treating England largely as a source of funds for his campaigns. He commanded the Third Crusade and secured celebrated victories against Saladin. On his way back, he was captured by Duke Leopold of Austria and held for a ransom of 150,000 marks, nearly 3 times England's annual revenue. He died in 1199 from a crossbow wound sustained while besieging a French castle. King John. Richard's younger brother John is widely regarded as England's worst king. He surrendered almost all English territory in France, earning the name Lackland, and fell into such a bitter dispute with the Pope that England was placed under interdict for 6 years. Under pressure from his barons, he signed Magna Carta in 1215, a document limiting royal power and establishing that even the monarch must answer to the law, principles that continue to influence legal systems around the world. He died the following year. King Henry III. Henry came to the throne aged 9 after his father John's death. He was crowned at Gloucester using his mother's bracelet, the crown jewels having been lost. His weak rule provoked a baronial uprising, and after his capture at the Battle of Lewes in 1264, he was forced to convene a parliament at Westminster, an institution that grew into the House of Commons. His chief legacy is the rebuilding of Westminster Abbey in the Gothic style we know today. King Edward I. Edward succeeded his father Henry III while abroad on crusade. Tall and formidable, nicknamed Longshanks, he conquered Wales, erected a network of imposing castles to hold it, and created his son as the first English Prince of Wales. His Scottish campaigns earned him the title Hammer of the Scots, and he removed the Stone of Scone to Westminster. In 1295, he established the Model Parliament, gathering knights, clergy, nobility, and commons together for the first time. King Edward II. Edward I's son proved a feeble and inept ruler. He was despised by his barons and suffered a catastrophic defeat to the Scots at Bannockburn in 1314. His own wife Isabella conspired with her lover to depose him in 1327. Edward was imprisoned in Berkeley Castle and murdered there shortly after. Legend suggests by a method designed to leave no visible wounds. King Edward III. Edward III became king at 14 following his father's deposition. His 50-year reign was shaped by the 100 Years' War with France, during which his victories at Crécy and Poitiers, alongside his son, the Black Prince, made them the most celebrated warriors in Europe. He founded the Order of the Garter, England's highest chivalric honor, which survives to this day. His reign was also scarred by the Black Death of 1348 to 1350, which wiped out roughly half of England's population. He outlived the Black Prince and died at 64. King Richard II. Richard inherited the throne at 10 after his grandfather Edward III. At 14, he showed unusual composure in facing down the peasants' revolt. Over time, however, he became extravagant and autocratic, especially after losing his beloved wife, Anne of Bohemia. By the end of his reign, he was widely hated, and he was deposed and imprisoned at Pontefract Castle, where he died in 1400, most likely through deliberate starvation. Shakespeare later gave his downfall immortal form in the play Richard II. King Henry IV. Henry seized the throne from his cousin Richard II after returning from exile, becoming the first Lancastrian king. He spent his entire reign fending off conspiracies and revolts. Worn down by unrelenting conflict and a debilitating illness, possibly leprosy, he died at 45, having never known a peaceful year as king. King Henry V. Henry IV's son was knighted at just 12 and proved himself an outstanding military leader. He reinvigorated the war against France and pulled off one of history's most famous upsets at the Battle of Agincourt in 1415, making him the foremost soldier in Europe. He was formally recognized as heir to the French throne and married Catherine, daughter of the French king. He never lived to be crowned there, however, dying of dysentery on campaign in France at 35. King Henry VI. Henry VI became king as an infant, inheriting both England and France. Gentle and devout by nature, he was ill-suited to the demands of kingship. He founded Eton College and King's College, Cambridge, but lost every French territory except Calais. From 1453, he suffered recurring episodes of mental illness, which gave the House of York the opening they needed to challenge him. Deposed in 1461, briefly restored in 1470, he was murdered in the Tower of London in 1471. King Edward IV. Edward seized the throne during the Wars of the Roses, becoming the first Yorkist king at only 18. A gifted battlefield commander, though morally reckless, he kept numerous mistresses and alienated allies by marrying a commoner in secret. Briefly ousted in 1470, he returned from exile and retook the throne. He later ordered the execution of his own brother George for treason, allegedly drowned in a barrel of wine. Edward died suddenly at 40, leaving two young sons, King Edward V. Edward IV's eldest son became king at 12, but reigned for only about 2 months. He and his younger brother were placed in the Tower of London by their uncle Richard, Duke of Gloucester, ostensibly for their safety ahead of the coronation. Richard then declared both princes illegitimate and took the crown himself as Richard III. The two boys were never seen again, and it is widely believed they were killed on Richard's orders, a mystery that has never been fully resolved. King Richard III. Richard III claimed the throne and moved ruthlessly against anyone who might challenge him, which made him deeply unpopular. In 1485, Henry Tudor landed in Wales, gathering supporters as he marched east. At the Battle of Bosworth Field, Richard was abandoned by key allies and killed in the fighting, the last English king to fall in battle. His skeletal remains were discovered beneath a Leicester car park in 2012 and reinterred at Leicester Cathedral in 2015. King Henry VII. With Richard III's defeat at Bosworth, the crown was placed on Henry Tudor's head, the first of the Tudor monarchs. To heal the division between York and Lancaster, he married Elizabeth of York, uniting the rival roses into the Tudor rose. A calculating and cautious ruler, he rebuilt the royal finances through heavy taxation. Though not beloved, he gave England stability after decades of civil war and left the kingdom solvent and at peace. King Henry VIII. Henry VIII is remembered above all for his 6 wives, though the deeper story is his desperation for a male heir. When the Pope refused to dissolve his marriage to Catherine of Aragon, Henry broke from Rome and made himself supreme head of the Church of England. He dissolved the monasteries and seized their wealth, steering England toward Protestantism. All 3 of his children, 2 sons and a daughter, eventually wore the crown, though he had 2 of their mothers executed along the way. King Edward VI, Edward, the son of Henry VIII, and Jane Seymour, became king at just 9. Raised as a committed Protestant, his reign consolidated England's break from Catholicism, with Thomas Cranmer's Book of Common Prayer establishing a new form of worship. He died of tuberculosis at only 15, and Lady Jane Grey briefly succeeded him for just 9 days before being set aside and later executed. Queen Mary I. Mary seized the throne with popular backing, widely seen as Henry VIII's rightful heir. A fervent Catholic, she reversed the Protestant reforms and burned nearly 300 Protestants at the stake, including Archbishop Cranmer, earning the lasting epithet Bloody Mary. Her reign was marked by false pregnancies and declining health. She died childless at 42. Queen Elizabeth I. The daughter of Anne Boleyn, Elizabeth succeeded her half-sister Mary and steered England back to Protestantism. She never married, becoming known as the Virgin Queen. Her reign was a period of exceptional cultural and national achievement. Shakespeare produced his greatest works, Francis Drake circumnavigated the globe, and the Spanish Armada was defeated in 1588. Adored by her subjects, she had a remarkable talent for surrounding herself with capable advisors. She died at 69, ending the Tudor line. King James I. Already King of Scotland, James inherited the English throne from Elizabeth, becoming the first monarch to rule both kingdoms simultaneously. In 1611, he commissioned the King James Bible, one of the most widely read and linguistically influential books in English history. His reign was troubled by religious tensions, most famously the Gunpowder Plot of 1605, in which Guy Fawkes and his Catholic co-conspirators attempted to blow up Parliament. James died at 58. King Charles I. Like his father James, Charles believed his authority derived directly from God, a conviction that brought him into perpetual conflict with Parliament. His efforts to levy taxes and impose religious changes without parliamentary approval triggered the English Civil War in 1642. After 4 years of fighting, he was captured by Oliver Cromwell's New Model Army, tried for treason against his own people, and beheaded in 1649, the only English monarch ever to be publicly executed. The monarchy was abolished, and England became a republic. Oliver Cromwell, Rising from minor gentry to become the most powerful figure in England, Cromwell commanded the new model army to victory and drove Charles I's execution. As Lord Protector, he governed with strict Puritan discipline, banning theater, Christmas, and various other pastimes. His campaigns in Ireland and Scotland were brutal and remain sources of bitterness today. He died at 59. His son Richard briefly inherited his position but lacked his authority, and within 2 years the monarchy was restored. King Charles II. Charles was invited to reclaim the throne following the collapse of the Protectorate, entering London to jubilant crowds on his 30th birthday. Known as the Merry Monarch, he had at least 13 mistresses, including the celebrated Nell Gwyn. His reign weathered the Great Plague of 1665 and the Great Fire of London the following year, after which Christopher Wren rebuilt St. Paul's Cathedral. Popular but politically weak, he fathered many illegitimate children, but no legitimate heir, and converted to Catholicism on his deathbed at 54. King James II. Charles II's younger brother James had converted to Catholicism in 1670, though both his daughters were brought up Protestant. His harsh treatment of Protestant clergy made him widely despised. After the Monmouth Uprising and the savage reprisals of Judge Jeffreys, Parliament invited the Dutch Prince William of Orange to take the throne, King William III and Queen Mary II. William of Orange arrived with his fleet in 1688 and advanced on London unopposed, the Glorious Revolution. He and his wife Mary, daughter of James II, were crowned as joint rulers, the only instance of this in English history. Mary died of smallpox at only 32. William ruled alone thereafter and defeated James II's attempt to reclaim his crown at the Battle of the Boyne in Ireland in 1690. Never embraced by the English, he died at 51 from injuries sustained in a riding accident. Queen Anne. Anne succeeded William III as the last Stuart monarch. Her greatest accomplishment was the Act of Union of 1707, which merged England and Scotland into the Kingdom of Great Britain. Her personal life was one of almost unbroken sorrow. She endured 17 pregnancies, yet not one of her children survived into adulthood. Her health deteriorated steadily, and she died at 49, leaving no heir. The crown passed to her distant Hanoverian cousin, beginning a new dynasty, King George I. George arrived from Hanover at 54 with little English and, apparently, little desire to learn it. He brought 2 mistresses and 18 cooks, but left his wife at home. He had imprisoned her for adultery. He delegated governance to his ministers, which gave rise to the role of Robert Walpole as Britain's first prime minister. George's clear preference for Hanover was evident to all. He died there during a visit at 67. King George II. More anglicized than his father, George II nonetheless leaned heavily on Robert Walpole to run the country. He holds the distinction of being the last British monarch to personally lead troops into battle, fighting at Dettingen in 1743 during the War of the Austrian Succession. His reign also saw the final Jacobite uprising, Bonnie Prince Charlie's bid to restore the Stuarts in 1745, crushed decisively. George died suddenly at 76. King George III. The first Hanoverian king born in England, George III reigned for 60 years, an era that produced literary giants such as Jane Austen, Shelley, and Wordsworth, and military heroes including Nelson and Wellington. He presided over the loss of the American colonies after the Declaration of Independence in 1776 and fought protracted wars against revolutionary and Napoleonic France. In his later years, severe mental illness, now thought to stem from porphyria, left him permanently blind and incapacitated. King George IV. George had already governed as Prince Regent since 1811 due to his father's incapacity. Hailed in his youth as the first gentleman of Europe for his cultural refinement, he was also widely considered vain, extravagant, and out of touch. He married twice, once in secret and once officially. His patronage of architecture and the arts left a genuine mark, including the Brighton Pavilion and much of Regent's Park. He died at 67, and his passing was greeted more with relief than grief. King William IV. The brother of George IV, William had never expected to become king, having spent 10 years in the Royal Navy, earning him the nickname the Sailor King. Before taking the throne, he lived openly with the actress Mrs. Jordan, with whom he fathered 10 illegitimate children. His reign saw the abolition of slavery in the British colonies in 1833 and the Reform Act of 1832, which extended voting rights. William died at 71 with no surviving legitimate heir, passing the throne to someone who would become one of Britain's greatest monarchs. Queen Victoria. Victoria inherited a weakened and unpopular throne at just 18 years of age, but her 63-year reign transformed the monarchy and defined an entire era, the Victorian era. In 1840, she married her cousin, Prince Albert, the love of her life, and together they had 9 children whose descendants spread across the royal houses of Europe. Albert's death in 1861 devastated her. She withdrew from public life for years and wore black for the rest of her days. Under her rule, the British Empire doubled in size, and in 1876 she became Empress of India. In 1897, she became the first monarch to celebrate a Diamond Jubilee. Victoria died at 81 and was at that time the longest reigning monarch in British history. King Edward VII. Edward waited 60 years to become king, while his mother Victoria refused to give him any real responsibility. Known as Bertie, he adored horse racing, gambling, and the company of others. Despite a reputation for scandal, he proved a popular and skilled king, using his charm to improve relations with France and earning the nickname the Peacemaker. His brief 9-year reign became known as the Edwardian era, a time of elegance before the coming storm. Edward died at 68. King George V. George succeeded his father, Edward VII, and proved a steady, dutiful king during turbulent times. In 1893, he married Princess Mary of Teck, his late brother's fiancée. His reign began with the sinking of the Titanic in 1912, but far greater tragedy followed with the First World War from 1914 to 1918. In 1917, with anti-German sentiment running high, he changed the family name from Saxe-Coburg and Gotha to Windsor, the name the royal family still bears today. George died at 70, having steered the monarchy through war and revolution. King Edward VIII. Edward was the most popular Prince of Wales Britain had ever seen, but his reign lasted less than a year. He was determined to marry the American divorcee, Wallis Simpson, who had 2 ex-husbands still living, something unacceptable to both the Church and Parliament. Faced with the choice between the crown and the woman he loved, Edward chose love abdicating in December 1936 and becoming the only British monarch to voluntarily give up the throne. He spent the rest of his life in exile abroad. King George VI. George never expected to be king, thrust onto the throne when his elder brother Edward abdicated. Shy and plagued by a severe stammer, he worked with a speech therapist to overcome it, a story later told in the film The King's Speech. His greatest test came with the Second World War, during which he refused to leave London despite the bombing. His and the Queen's steadfast presence made them beloved by the British people. His reign also saw the birth of the National Health Service and the beginning of the end of the British Empire with Indian independence in 1947. Exhausted by years of strain and a heavy smoker, George died of lung cancer at 56. Queen Elizabeth II. Elizabeth became queen at 25. Her coronation in 1953 was the first to be televised, watched by millions around the world. She reigned for 70 years, the longest of any British monarch, witnessing extraordinary change from post-war austerity to the digital age. Throughout it all, she remained a constant, dutiful presence, earning deep respect for her dedication to service. She celebrated her Platinum Jubilee in June 2022, just months before her death at Balmoral at the age of 96. Elizabeth II was survived by 4 children, 8 grandchildren, and 12 great-grandchildren. King Charles III. Charles became king at 73, the oldest heir apparent ever to succeed to the British throne, having waited longer than anyone in history. He married Lady Diana Spencer in 1981 in a fairy tale wedding watched by 750 million people. But the marriage ended in divorce and Diana's fatal car crash in 1997. Charles later married his longtime love, Camilla Parker Bowles, who became queen upon his accession. His legacy is still being written today. Over 1,200 years, 63 monarchs, every throne won through blood, marriage, war, or betrayal. From the very first king of a united England to the man who wore the crown at 73. History never stopped, and neither did they. If this video kept you hooked, smash that like button and subscribe, because this is just the beginning.